so there's nothing special or significant. Let me know if you get what I'm saying. Nothing special or significant has to happen in the world for black-owned businesses to be boycotted. They just boycott them because they just want them to die anyway. And you had no business owning the business. Why would your black butt even think that you should be a business owner? You're supposed to be somebody's employee. And not only do others think that about us, that's one thing. It'd be bad enough if others felt that way about us. But self-perception and self-worth is kind of a two-way street. So what really makes it sinister is not that other people feel that way about us. What makes it sinister is that we feel that way about ourselves. So because we feel that way about ourselves, because we see ourselves as subservient to others, because we see ourselves as kind of the economic losers in the game or the subordinate class or the weaker class, we train our children to work for other people. And so, as a result of that, trillions of dollars, trillions with a T, gets thrown out of the community every generation because we raise our children and say, "Hey, make sure you dress nice and you learn how to speak proper and you go to school because at some point there is a white man that you're going to ask for a job and you really, really want this white man to like you." And what's interesting is that I don't know many white people who raise their children uh, to um, to expect that they're going to work for a black person, right? Now, isn't that strange that most black people expect to work for a white person? Right? Most black people kind of assume, like, if you have a job, if your friend says, "I got a new job," and someone was to say, "Okay, let's take a bet. Do you think that they work for a black-owned business or do you think they work for a white-owned business?" What do you think they're going to bet? Like, who do you think that they're going to expect that person to work for? Right in the chat. Okay. So if you want to talk about this, I think it's a little bit, I think you got to really, 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 to analyze a problem, you got to question the assumptions of the problem. If you start a math problem, remember I taught math at the University of Kentucky, and you sit and you think about little things like, why do so many black people work for white people in the first place? Well, that's interesting because that is the fundamental assumption. We pretty much assume, we pretty much expect, and that you're going to work for a white person, and if you don't, like if you work for a black person, that becomes a big deal. If a white person works for a black person, that's a big deal. No one expects that. So when you're kind of sort of thinking about how to solve these economic problems, you really have to kind of back up and kind of look at the assumptions of the problem and say, okay, maybe if we wanted to really start talking about changing these economic outcomes, if we wanted to have a power shift and we want to talk about building Black Wall Street and everything else, I think you got to start with the economic self-esteem issue and just ask yourself just basically like why is it that we are trained to assume that we're supposed to work for other people, but it would be ridiculous, hilarious, it would just be almost ludicrous and almost maniacal, almost seen as insane to think that your black child is supposed to be the boss and other people's children are supposed to be the employee. But for some families, that's the default. That's the default assumption. Donald Trump, when he raises his children, I don't think Donald Trump raises his children to expect to work for anybody, especially not a black person. But many people will work for Trump's kids because it's a mindset. It's also an economic positioning sort of thing, right? So if you really want to sort of talk about just basic things that will make a massive difference in your wealth status as a community, you got to look at where you're putting your dollars. You got to look at the assumptions that you're making, and then that all those things impact your economic self-esteem. So let's hop into this buy black thing. I'm on page 25 of my book. It's called The 10 Commandments of Black Economic Power.